Well, in a true Mercury retrograde fashion, we had some very interesting technical difficulties. I do not know what that was. Wow, I've never seen that happen before in all the history I've ever been on IGTV. So that's really interesting. But we're back now. I'm going to go ahead and wait until we can get Sarah back. Thank you for hanging in there with us, as I was saying a moment ago. Mercury retrograde, let us live. Let us live. We're trying to have a conversation today. Goodness gracious. All right, fingers crossed this works. Yeah, we're just gonna roll with it. We're just gonna roll with it. Here we go, we're
Listen,
back.
these stars out here, the planets, the stars, I don't know who doesn't want us to be great.
I know it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, I was just saying that Mercury retrograde is really trying us today. So, but we're just gonna go with it. So we were talking about this concept of good pee and this concept of good pussy, having yeah, just wanting to sort of pick that apart. And I would like to know from you, Sarah, like, do you, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this because you're an excellent sex educator, but do you ever define genitals as being good or bad? And I also want to know, like, how do you think our perceptions of the ways that we view our bodies, the ways that we view our genitals, has an impact on our relationship?
Yeah, we definitely, of course not, ever see a body part as good or bad. They're body parts. They're
Yeah.
different. They serve us in all of these different ways. We would never assign, a value, a qualification to our body parts. As for, the impact on our sex, our relationships, and like these definitions and perceptions of bodies, listen, the reality that the messages that we've heard about our bodies, this concept that we're going to like tease apart about good pee. I mean, we could tease apart the good and who assigned it and who's
Yeah.
owning it. And we can tease apart this definition of pee. I mean, I'd like to push that the pee isn't only naming a body part, but like, what about naming our power and our pleasure, right? And those pieces. So, I think there's all this notion of really leaning into, listen, we can take ownership of things. And honestly, we have moments where our body part isn't working the way we want it to, or it doesn't
Yeah.
feel the way we want it to. These are all truths. It doesn't make it good or bad. Definitely not.
Yeah.
And I think, the other piece is like, I'd love to tease apart these themes that we're seeing in society and in pop culture about folks reclaiming or claiming, but publicly. It's not that we're reclaiming necessarily. We've had ownership of our bodies and of our power, but are we doing it publicly the way that I know that this talk is also referring to, Cardi B's and Meg Thee Stallion's song WAP, and like really owning this power in our bodies, and they're paying homage and demonstrating that power. But also like this reality of wetness as a thing that happens, right? And different people, different ways, different times, different amounts, but it's a thing, and it's not something that we want to carry that stigma of. We want to have ownership around whatever it is our bodies are doing in that moment.
Yeah.
And seeing those pieces.
Yeah. I would add to that actually that, one of the things that I've been exploring within just my own work, both professionally and personally, is taking some of the emphasis off of sort of the standard ways that we think about sex or have sex or experience sexual pleasure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my vag. I love my pussy. I love my clitoris. All of those things. They're like the nucleus. It can be a nucleus for me of sexual pleasure, but that's not the only source point that we can reference or experience when it comes to sexual pleasure or just pleasure in general. And within my work, what I really try to talk about a lot is this concept of sensuality, and sensuality being a vehicle to help us access parts of our pleasure that we experience throughout our entire bodies. Our entire bodies are primed for pleasure. And if we really I don't know. I think that it's a little unconventional. I think that it's good that the WAP exists. I think that it's good that there's, you know, a lot of stuff happening in culture that's talking about it. But I also know that sometimes that relationship that folks have with that part of themselves, their genitals, their vagina, their penis, whatever it is, that could be a fraught relationship. And so I don't want to isolate anyone out in this conversation to think that, like, oh my gosh, the only way that you can experience pleasure or sexuality or sexual intimacy is through this one particular part. Because I mean, I get so much joy and pleasure when I feel my partner touching my shoulders or the back of my neck or rubbing my foot or whatever. So I just wanted to put that into the conversation as well.
Yeah, I love that you brought that into the conversation, because I think that so often we in it, you may have this experience, this may sparkle for you, that when folks come and ask about sexuality, sex education, I mentioned that I had an opportunity to listen to some of your podcasts around being a sexuality educator, and this notion, like thinking of all the senses and the pleasure that it gives us. And you know, I would like to pose that we feel that, like, think about when there's a good meal on the table and the sounds when people are digging into those first few bites, right? And like the mouth feel of whatever that bite. Last weekend I made my aunt's pound cake. Well, you know, honor where we get joy, right? Mm-hmm. And especially in this reality, this moment of the world, and finding joy where we can. And if it's in our bodies, if it's in our touch, as you mentioned, like a gentle touch from a partner. I mean, this isn't sexual pleasure, but I do think it's honoring just the way that we care for each other. Is that I washed my daughter's hair, and she was washing her hair as she's leaning over the tub and just massaging her scalp. And she was like, you know, that just, it felt good for her, right? And that you want to do that. And I want to like plant those seeds so that she has memories, you know, of being nurtured. And we have that in all moments of our lives, and being able to hold those. And I think also communicate them to the people who want to care for us about how we do experience, and that it's not, sexual pleasure is a key piece for many of us, but not for everyone. And there's other ways we all get pleasure. And so acknowledging also that on the spectrum is important too.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
You know, Ev'Yan, I'm super curious to hear more about what it is to be a sexuality doula. And I'd love to hear about, like I said, I'm intrigued, and I can't wait to listen to more episodes of your podcast. But like, I'm interested in how you came to this work, and to that role, and what that means for you, how that shows up, and you know what that path looks like.
Yeah. That's a question I get a lot, because I think a lot of people see what I do and they're like, okay, I get the sexuality part, I get the doula part. What does that mean when they're melded together? For me, I look at the work that I do as helping people through some form of transition. So we all know that most doulas work with people through transition from pregnancy to birth, from life to death, from even like birth to like motherhood. I mean, there are all different types of doulas. And so as a sexuality doula, what I do is I help folks transition from sexual shame, sexual dysfunction, sexual disconnection, any fear that they have around their own sexual identities or the connection that they have with their body, and transition them into sexual liberation, sexual empowerment, whatever that looks like for them. I mean, that can look like someone who is like, oh my gosh, this whole time I thought that there was something wrong with me, but really I'm just an asexual person. And being able to give those people tools and resources, and also affirmation about who they are, and get them on a path of being connected to sexuality that is healthy, you know? And I mean, I've been doing this work for over a decade, but officially, like my whole business sort of thing, I'm actually celebrating my 10-year anniversary this month. So I know, it's crazy. And honestly, whenever someone asks me about like how I got into this work, I say that like, I didn't choose this work. This work chose me because so much of my own relationship with sexuality and my identity and my orientation and just sex as a whole for me was so fraught and so hard. And that has a lot to do with the shame that culture has given me, the shame that religion has given me, and just how much ignorance there is out there about sex and sexuality that I just did not grow up with. So I really started this journey wanting to get to the bottom and to the root of what was keeping me from being sexually free. And I began to chronicle that very publicly. And before I know it, like I'm doing sessions with folks and teaching workshops, and it's been quite a beautiful journey. But the thing that I always come back to, especially I've been thinking about it now as I'm in my 10-year anniversary month, is like who I'm doing this for. And I always center women, femmes, and non-binary folks in my work. I just think that we need so much support, and white supremacist patriarchal capitalism has done a number on us. And it's so, so, so important that we get the care and the healing and the liberation that we need. And also, I do this work for myself. Like I do this work for the younger version of myself who did not get comprehensive sex education when she was 5, 12, 15, 18. I do it for the younger version of myself who thought that there was something wrong with her because, maybe I wasn't having explosive orgasms with sex, and I thought that there was something wrong with me for that. I really do this work to also give back to myself with where I am now. Like everything that I know about sexuality, I've learned through my peers, my clients, and those things like really feed and affirm my own sexual identity. And yeah, it's just, I love doing this work so much, and I have such a soft spot for it because of how deeply it has impacted and really shifted the trajectory of how I embody my body and the space that can take up.
I think that's incredible. And I love the themes of just centering and healing. And what especially resonated for me is this, like, that you're doing the work for your younger self.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of healing work with someone who's a healer. I'm not a healer, but like someone who does healing work. And I've had experiences where like talking to the younger self really is cathartic. And it's so incredible to hear about that. And when I think about sex education and the way that we want to be thinking about it through the lifespan, and how important it is to have this opportunity to understand and learn, get to know your body and yourself and your identities as you're growing up. It's such an incredible, rich journey. So I'm so glad to learn more about your work and to hear about how you're helping others on your own path.
Thank you. I actually wanted to add to that because I got a question recently from an interview where someone was like, so when do you think is the appropriate time to talk about sex? And when do you think, when is sort of like the cutoff time? Like when should you sort of know everything you need to know about sex, sexuality, identity, gender? And my response was like, I hope to be continuing my sexual education well into my 80s. I hope I live that long, like I think that there is so much to learn about your sexual identity and the way that you access sex, in particular as you age. I mean, who I am today as a 33-year-old is so different than who I was when I was 18 and I was accessing my sexuality. So I wanted to put that in there too, because I think sometimes people can get a little cocky, like, I've been on this earth for several decades, I don't need any more, I've read all the books. Like, I think it's really important to keep learning.
Yeah, when you first started, going down that path, I heard my mother's voice in my head. I grew up, both of my parents were educators, and my mother used to say that there was a value in being a lifelong learner. And I like that that value is ingrained in me. And I hear that same piece in what you were saying. And I really want to sort of underline and highlight and italicize all of those things that you said, because that question that person asked you, I get asked as well, and I'm sure
Yeah.
so many others in our field do.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage folks to start to expand and see the fluidity through the lifespan, and
Yes.
recognize that um, this the reason I love this work is that sexuality, however it shows up for each of us differently for each of us, is an interwoven inherent part of our humanity for each of us. And
Yeah.
that is a common thread, even if the way I experience and you experience it is not the same. But the fact that that we have this piece of ourselves is a shared thread, and
Yeah.
that for me, and that shared thread exists through the lifespan, and that it's not that you're gonna like flip a switch, turn on the sexuality, and then flip a switch and you're done being sexual. And like,
Yeah.
helping people to evolve their thinking to that this is a trajectory, and that our bodies are changing, our life experiences are changing, our moods are changing,
Right.
and we're evolving stress and stressors. I mean, we've talked so many times about sex in the pandemic, and people's libidos are up, people's libidos are flatlines, people's libidos are all over the map. It's not what you were like before, and all these things. And you know, I think about young people at home. I mean, adolescence. To be home with your parents, maybe your parents are cool AF, but I would have liked to break if it were me. And so like, I'm feeling for those young folk, right?
Yeah.
I'm feeling for folk, maybe for whom it's not safe to be, you know, to give honor to their true selves. And doing that in this pandemic where they're sheltering at home. And so this part of ourselves isn't stopping because of a pandemic. And so this value of us being available to have this conversation online, so folks can access and hear and engage, is so powerful to me. I'm trying to find the little silver linings.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say too, that like, this is why resources like this, events like this are so vital and so powerful, because they create community that otherwise you may not have, you know? I mean, we cannot have. I mean, if you're playing the pandemic, right? I know some people are around here being like, what pandemic? But like, it's gonna be impossible to find an event in your area about something like this. And so that's why I love the work that we do, because of the way that it connects us to other people and other people to us. Okay, so my next question, I would love to know from you, like, how do you see sex education as a tool that can empower Black folks, Black women, Black femmes to be more confident about owning our sexuality, our sexual pleasure, in a culture that is very much steeped in misogynoir, white supremacy, racism, all of it?
Yeah. So I have a few thoughts actually about that. And so one piece is, listen, we've seen historically, if we want to look at the messages we've seen in media and music, that Black women and femmes and Black folks have talked about and owned their own pleasure in pop culture and music. I mean, honestly, I'm a child. You know, I just told colleagues, I'm embracing my auntie status, friends. I'm sliding right in, and I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And I remember Salt and Pepper, and we talk. Let's talk about sex, and that was right. And like, there's an anthem for my adolescence, my teenage years, and this isn't new, right? That we've been talking. We've had these messages in pop culture. So that's obviously something that we can point to and find strength and affirmation in. But I think that, you know, the other piece is like this, to really name and dismantle, and almost then rebuild on the white supremacist structures that informed the sex education that young people are getting. And so what I'd love to see our colleagues do, and I hope that our work can help further, is listen, we need to develop a skill set. We have to acknowledge how the field of sex education is predominantly white, and that the way that, you know, if you're looking at sex education in a evidence-based intervention way, which is not the only way, but it's a way a lot of kids get it. Many kids get it through those boxes. And how do we train our educators to be able to identify those pieces that are rooted in oppression and then adapt them so that they're actually centering the way that BIPOC folk, you know, are living and being affirmed. And I think that's a skill set that this field is, you know, needs to be driving towards. And so it's this real piece of having a skill set around, if that's the way that you're delivering sex education. I think there's other sex education work that's happening around affirmation, around owning your pleasure, owning your sexuality. Like there's all these different ways that it works, maybe depending on how you choose to do the work and depending on who your audience is.
Right. Yeah.
So those are my initial thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I could go on and on about dismantling white supremacy in sex education.
Oh my God. I mean, we could have a whole other talk devoted to just that topic. You know, I think everything that you said is so true. And I think it's really important for folks who are listening to know that, like, sexuality education as a whole came on the backs of enslaved Black folks. You know what I mean? Like,
let's absolutely start there.
Yeah, like let's start there. Let's start where, like, the whole gynecological practice started on the backs of Black enslaved women. So, like, I want for people to understand that when we talk about sex education and, like, dismantling white supremacy, those two are, like, they're very, very interlinked. Like, it's very impossible to it's very impossible to have one without the other, because it was literally founded on the bodies of enslaved Black folks. And and people don't want to talk about that.
Listen,
you know?
The history is super real, and we can just, if my memory serves, I believe those women's names were Lucy and Aneshka and Betsy. And I feel like we can just have a moment for, I can't imagine the torture and pain that they experienced. And we can think of the history of reproductive injustice and oppression and how that has led to these systems that we are working to dismantle today, that we are all subject to. It's the air we breathe. And, you know, I think the other piece is that there are BIPOC and Black and people of color sex educators doing this work and really centering their expertise and the way that they show up for their communities to me, is also a movement forward. And so it's really like, how are we lifting up that expertise and ensuring that there isn't erasure? And in the way that they are centering and honoring the different ways that, like, again, a lot of my work is focused on young people, but just honoring the different ways that they're seeing the young people, right? And that we're not hypersexualizing Black kids and giving them, you know, these risk reduction instead of assets-based frameworks in which to work. So it's just these opportunities to really center the folks doing the work and that's community led. It feels to me like the path I want to see move forward.
Yes. Oh my God. Me too. Me too. Oh, we should have another conversation about sex ed, Black folks. Like, oh, we could go on and on.
I'm always here for that. Always here for that. A question, you know, and we might have already gone down this a little bit, but I'd love to, like, press it a little further, is, you know, how do you, especially in your doula work and your healing work, how do you define sexuality and the way that pleasure figures into that? Because the complexity you mentioned before, I'm not sure if there's other pieces.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I got into this work, I heard the word sexuality and I thought that it had to do with sort of your sexual orientation, and that's just it. There's like sex, what you do, and sexuality, how you do it, you know? Which I don't think is wrong. I think that is true. But in my work, I've expanded that definition a bit more to be that like sexuality is not just what you do, it's also the energy behind you do. It's also sort of like what stories come through when you are being in a sexual space. It's like the stories you tell yourself. It's the stories that have been impressed upon you. I also feel that there is a lot of connection between sexuality and gender and the way you inhabit your body and the way that you see yourself as a sexual being, I think is a really big one. I think for me, I have always, up until this is something I'm trying to like deconstruct, but I've always kind of like approached my sexuality as a particular trope or a performance that I need to be in. And so this idea of seeing my sexuality, of not being that, like not being a template that I embody and I'm, or a character that I put on, but rather like who I am, like who I am fundamentally, how I want to feel in sex, who I want to be as a sexual person. Yeah, I think that my definition and the way that I see sexuality as a whole has like really expanded to fit all of those things, because I believe that, like, at least for me, my sexuality is so deeply touched by so many other things in my life. Like if I have something that is way off in my work life, it's going to show up in my sex life. If I have something way off in the relationship that I have with my body, it's going to show up in my sex life. If I have something way off about like the way that I'm not sleeping, you know, like it's all very interconnected to me. So I like to say, especially in my work as a sexuality doula, I think some people think that I am talking about vibrators and lube and dildos all day, which that's a lot of fun. But actually, I spend a lot of time talking about bodies, like body acceptance. And I spend a lot of time talking about like getting really clear about the messages that your body is signaling to you. Because if you don't know when your body is telling you no, you're going to have a hard time being able to assert that no or that yes within a sexual context. So like I really try to come to my work from a place of like very foundational, very holistic. And so that's sort of the ways that I see the word sexuality.
Yeah, that resonates so strongly with me. And I think this piece that's coming up for me is like, I'm assuming, but maybe I need to ask you actually, do you primarily do your work with adults?
Yes, I only work with adults. Yeah.
Right. So it's I automatically like put things into, okay, if we were going to apply this to young people framework, what does that look like? And what I hear for me is like, and a lot of times I use examples with, I'm a parent of an 8-year-old child, and I think about, even I can hear my voice saying to her, listen to your body. Right? Mm-hmm. Like at the dinner table, right? Like, do you feel full? Do you feel full enough to get through the night? Like even if I look at her plate and her plate's whatever, half done, whatever it could be,
right?
That she checks in with herself and hears that, and that we're affirming, you know, back, just like I'm hopping around here, but because back to that previous question about, you know, age for sex education, what I'm hoping to do, and what I hope that others are doing, is that this becomes a foundational building block for when young people need to check in with themselves in different other points of their lives.
Yes.
That they know how to listen to what's inside, right? And that they also expect to be heard when they assert what it is that they need or want or don't want.
Yes.
And so those are pieces that, you know, you're doing that work individually. Hopefully we're all doing that work for ourselves, asking ourselves. But I want to also offer, because so many folks do ask that question, what age, that's a thing we do with young children. Young children show you, I don't want to be hugged. Then we can respect that. We don't want to force a hug on a body. Yeah. Especially a small body, because you can overpower them. Yes. And then they're expecting not to push, that I can't push back because I could get fussed at, right?
Right.
So these are pieces where I see how that your work actually does, there are synergies through that younger lifespan, that younger
Yeah.
age group, and you're driving into the trajectory where you are with
Yeah,
your client.
absolutely. 100%.
I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the time.
I
I
know, I was
know
looking at
it
the
said
time
just
too.
5 or 6 minutes left, so I want to be careful that we use it as richly as possible.
Yes. Me too. I
Have
should
you,
also say
oh,
too,
go
like
ahead.
if anyone has any questions that they would like for us to answer, we'll take a couple before we head off. So I think the easiest way for people to ask questions is to not ask them in the chat, but actually ask them in the little icon with the little, it's like a little chat bubble with the question mark in it. Go ahead and put some questions in there. We'll get to a couple. Yeah, I forgot to say that at the beginning. So.
While folks are going to be, sending a couple of questions in, I wonder what's coming up. Are there things coming up in your work in this moment around the pandemic, around folks, what are we, physical distancing, sheltering at home in place? Like the language keeps changing, but we're still home.
Yeah.
That coming up in your work, how are you advising folks, and how are you advising them to take care of themselves and find that pleasure, be it an orgasm or be it a hot bath?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, I think you alluded to this a little bit, or you mentioned it a little bit ago about how like either people's sex drives are going way up or they're plummeting to the floor. And I'm seeing a lot of people in my work where their libidos or their drives for sex are almost non-existent, which I can relate to. When I'm stressed, when I'm anxious, the first thing that leaves is my sex drive. I'm just like, I need fight or flight. I need to only worry about eating food, drinking water, and making sure that I'm bathed, and that's it. So like I can really resonate with that. And that can be really discombobulating for folks who have had very vibrant and beautiful and exciting sex lives, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, it's been quite a long time and I don't have desire, or I'm still going through this dry spell. And I say to these folks, like, give yourself space and grace, because we are going through a lot right now. And for a lot of us, we have never, ever experienced anything what we're going through right now. So there's like literally no way for you to know how you could have approached or responded to this. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I try to encourage people to do, or at least just get them to be curious about, is the different ways that you can access intimacy with yourself, intimacy with your partner, pleasure with yourself, pleasure with your partner, that doesn't have to do with sex. Like I'm really interested in that. I see so much in sex education. We talk about sex as an intercourse, sex as in whatever you do that will result to an orgasm at the end of whatever it is you're doing. And I think that that's great. And I certainly tell my clients and my students, like, yeah, masturbate. This is a great time to be exploring yourself and stuff like that. But for those of us who just couldn't even go there, for those of us who are like, man, my dildo has been in my bedside table for like 7 months. I'm so not interested. I'm like, that's okay.
You're
That
like,
doesn't
brush
mean,
the dust off.
yeah, literally. I mean, I have a couple dildos in there myself that are like that. But that doesn't mean that you're not a sexual being. Like just because you're not having sex doesn't mean that you're not a sexual being. My philosophy is that we are sexual beings inside and outside of the bedroom. I believe that I'm a sexual being as I am sitting here speaking with you. And so if that's the case, what sort of acts and activities can I do during the day outside of the bedroom that can affirm that? Like what kinds of things can I do to keep myself feeling good throughout the day? Some people would say turned on, but I think sometimes that language can feel very sexual still. And some people are like, oh, but that's sex and I'm not really interested. But yeah, I like to invite people to think like, what are the other ways that you can turn yourself on? What are the other ways that you can make yourself feel good?
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate the realness there. I mean, that is what we are all going through. And I'll just share with this, intimate group of 100 people and us, that you know, I'm a December baby, and all I wanted was pajamas and a robe. Like, I literally just want comfort. I want soft.
Yes.
I wore a robe. I got a silk robe for my birthday, and I
Oh,
wore
I
it
love a good
New
robe. I'm like
Year's
wearing one right
Day,
now.
all day with my hair tied up. And
Yes.
I made black eyed peas, and I sat all day in that robe. And there's this thing about, even though I don't, you know, we're not getting dressed the way we did, or at least
Right.
I'm not. But this I'm trying to find even just the soft fabric on my skin.
Yeah.
Like, we need these comforts since we have been denied so many.
Right.
And how do we, you know, lean into that for know that for ourselves, and honor those small needs for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're talking about, in essence, is sensuality, the practice of sensuality. It's the practice of like making sure that all of your senses, your sense of sight, your sense of sound, taste, touch. There's another one that I'm forgetting. What did I miss? Which one did I miss?
Scent?
Oh, scent. Yes. I always like, I should know them like by heart, but I always miss one. But it's like making sure that as you're moving throughout the day, how is my sense of taste being activated in this moment? Or like maybe your sense of taste is being activated, and you can check in and be like, what sense hasn't been activated today? Or what sense haven't I been giving my attention to? And that could be a really great invitation to be like, you know what, let me get my robe. Let me put my robe on, and like, I'm wearing a robe right now. So like, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah.
You're like, I gotta get it. Right.
But yeah, like what can I do to bring some comfort to me? What can I do to bring some softness and some stillness? So I love that. I love that suggestion.
Yeah, I hope everyone who's joined has an opportunity. Folks are in the chat talking about their weighted blankets and their robes and slippers. And I just love that it's gone from, you know, owning our power and pleasure and finding pleasure in our plush slippers.
Yes.
That is where we need to be.
Yes. Wonderful. Do you think we should take a couple of questions before we head out?
Sounds
okay,
good.
Cool. I will go through some of them. Oh, this is a good question, actually. Let's start with this one. Is vibrators good for health?
Vibrators are great if you want a vibrator. Rock out.
Beautiful. Yes.
And like, listen, I mean, and different ones are going to have different sensations. And so whatever works for your body is going to vary. And obviously, not only do they each have a different sensation and a power and a speed or a direction that it's, you know, stimulating you in, but they're great if there's something that you're enjoying.
Yes.
One of the pieces I've always said is, I think it's just that you're cool with trying it, right? Like, whatever it is that you're going to try, vibrators or any other thing, if you're cool with trying it, that's great.
Yeah.
That's where it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I picked this question because I get it a lot. A lot of people, there's a lot of misconception that like vibrators will, I don't know, mess up your clitoris or whatever. And like, I just, yeah, that could be a whole other topic, but I'm so glad that you mentioned, like, if you want to try a vibrator and you like it, it's good for your health. You know, if it brings enjoyment to your sex life, it's good.
Well, and we can also like get into it here. So if vibrators result in orgasm for you, orgasm is a stress releaser. Orgasm helps if you are someone who and you get cramps, that can reduce cramps. Orgasms can help you sleep. And so there are, if a vibrator is a path to that for you, it's absolutely affirmatively good for your health.
Yes.
It's not questionable. Like, actually, those are great things.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. We focus too much on like, is it dulling sensation? But it's like, did it give you an orgasm though? Because orgasms can do this.
If that's where you're headed, rock out. Yes.
Exactly. Okay.
If you don't have an orgasm, that's not bad.
Yes.
That's also fine. If you were like, that was an interesting sensation, but I'm not about it, that's also a good thing to know about yourself.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. Love that. Okay. Let's pick another one. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. What's the key to good pee?
I mean, I want to be like, Ashley, what do you think the key to good pee is, right? Like, I think this
Right.
piece of what works for us
Mm.
is really, for each of us, it's going to be, what we said before, for each one of us is going to be different. Our bodies are different. Our stressors are different. Our turn-ons, our kinks are different. And so like understanding that what you define as good and even what you define as pee, is it your pleasure? Is it your power? Is it your
Yes.
punani? Whatever. Like, is it your penis? Whatever it is, that to me, that's for you to decide.
Yeah.
How do you react to that one?
Yeah. I see some people in the chat are like, what is pee? We're talking about pussy. We're talking about pleasure. We're talking about penis. I mean, power. I mean, that word, the P could stand for so many things. Probably what this person was asking was about the pussy or the penis. I mean, you know, this question sort of perplexed me. I have to be honest, because I'm like, what? Don't we all have good pee? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I'm like, to what standard are we measuring to? You know what I mean? Like, is there is there sort of like a hierarchy of what a good pee is? Like, I don't know.
Are we
I
grading
wanna,
it? No.
yeah, like I want to be careful
I mean,
about being like,
I think it was also to challenge this idea of other people defining it for us. And
yeah,
so for us to grasp it and to say, listen, our body is what it is, and we're calling it good, as opposed to
yes,
someone else being, that one's good, that one, we're not
yes,
trying to go there. We're done with that. We're done with other people coming in and trying to assign qualities to our body parts. To me, it's that tension that we're trying to push up against.
yes, yes. And I love that, because that's where I go. Like, I'm not really interested in giving you tips and tricks on what to eat to make your pussy taste sweeter. Like, that sort of stuff is like so outside of my realm of interest. But like, what I'm really interested in is empowering people to see that whatever pee they got, whether that it's power, penis, pussy, pleasure, that it is good because they cultivate it, they nurture it, they show up every single day to make sure that the relationship that they have with those things is healthy, is safe, is consensual, and makes them feel good ultimately. So like, I
And
have a good pee because of that.
and I'd want to add, sometimes bad things happen, may not be your fault.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's not good.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So that we're not only assigning good in this moment of like, people are have bad experiences, have trauma, and all our stuff is collectively good. So let's just all go ahead and wear that cape.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. Do you want to do one more question?
Sure. Let's do one more.
All right. Let me see. We're getting so many, and I wish that we could answer all of them. But unfortunately, we cannot. Okay. You know what? Since we're talking about WAP, since we're talking about good pee, let's go here, because I think that this is a question that people have a lot. I have certainly gotten this question, and I would love to hear like your expertise on this in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think this notion, like, listen, everyone's body reacts to just their normal hormonal changes differently and to different degrees, and to the environment, to listen, scents, fragrances, chemicals, and we have a lot of chemicals in our environment, and also to stressors, as you named.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that, listen, when we talk about WAP, and that's great, but that's not everyone's reality.
Yes. Thank you.
And so, listen, lube is great. Slip and slide, my friends.
More
Enjoy.
lube. Woo!
Right. And I'll just find the one that works for you.
Yeah.
Try, because your balance, your pH may need like, you may need to try a couple so that it's the one that works for you and for your partner, if you're having sex with a partner or more than one partner. So like, I feel like wet WAP doesn't mean it didn't come out of a tube. It just means you got it, right? Like, rock out. If that's going to be power for you and pleasure for you, rock out.
Yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think perhaps some people are like, okay, so I have to have a wet ass pussy naturally. Like, my pussy has to get wet just by thinking about something.
Then you're impressed. Then you're pressed. There's so much pressure.
Right,
and then
exactly.
You're not feeling pleasure because you're stressed out.
Right. So, like, how about you find a really good lube, and then your pussy will be wet by itself without you having to worry about. I mean, even if you have a WAP, I think that you should use lube anyway. I'm a huge proponent of using lube, even when you think you don't need it. It's just going to make things so much more comfortable.
Well, and then the piece around tissues, right? And these
Right.
are sensitive, delicate tissues that are vulnerable to tears. And so there's this piece around being aware that it's not like, first of all, you're not more of any kind of person. You're not a better person if you don't use lube. You're a person. Use what works for you.
Yes.
And like, also in the way that we want to hold power and protect our very delicate body parts, if you're having vaginal sex or anal sex, lube is integral, because we want to have those tissues not tear.
Yeah.
Because there's pressure in sex. That is just a fact of if you have penetrative sex.
Yeah.
So that's that. And it could be, digital penetration fingers. It could be a toy. It could be a penis. So I think it's just really important. Like, these are good things because we want to take care of our bodies, right?
Yes. Yeah. Everything you said. I co-sign everything you said. And I'm so glad that we brought that into this conversation. I mean, the title of this is called Vibrators and WAP. So I think it's a perfect question to end on, I think.
So I agree. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I hope that everyone listening enjoyed the conversation as well. We're so happy to have done it. And please know that I'm going to read this little thing so everyone knows what's going on. You can join Planned Parenthood and My Brown Box next Friday at the same time for another great conversation on body positivity and self-love. Next week's IG Live is going to be Been Fat, Been Fine, Been Free. Meanwhile, if you want to keep in touch, please make sure to follow My Brown Box and also follow Planned Parenthood for continued content. And yeah, I'm so excited. So happy that I got a chance to chat with you today, Sarah.
Me too, Ev'Yan. Thanks so much. It was great.
Yes, so much fun. Everyone take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Bye. Bye.